Thanks for joining us. We love getting to share the message of God's grace with the entire world. If His message has impacted your life, would you share your testimony with us by emailing it to stories@graceorlando.com. We love to hear what God is up to. You can also give in support of this ministry by going to our website and clicking on the Give button at graceorlando.com. Thanks again.
Well, good morning. Woo! This morning is already off to a good start. How many of y'all enjoyed that worship? That was awesome. I love declaring those things. Hey, this morning we are going to wrap up a series I have really enjoyed called We Are Storytellers. We've been talking about a little bit about us, our church, what makes us kind of tick. You've gotten to hear from multiple of the staff, actually all of the staff minus one, so I bet you can guess who's up today. We're going to hear from Gabby and Niquette here in just a little bit. We're going to do a little bit different than you've probably heard the others. It's because she loves to get up behind a microphone, right? No. Okay. Well, anyway, we're going to talk in just a few minutes, but just to catch you up on a few things. Again, we've been talking about our calls to ministry. Okay, and I've made this comment on the front side of the series, and I meant it, and that is that all of us are called to ministry. Now, maybe you say, well, Javen, the Bible says that certain people are called to this fivefold ministry thing, and that's true, but all of us are involved because we're the body of Christ, and so all of us are called to this thing called ministry. If you want to have the best stories come out of doing meaningful ministry together, and we want to invite every single one of you into this thing we call ministry. Next week, we'll start a new series, and we'll move on with things, and my hope is that throughout the course of this series that you've been praying about and asking God, what is it inside of me? What have you placed inside of me to use in the fellowship, to use in the community? Because that's why you're here. God hasn't brought you here on accident. You're not here for no purpose at all, but instead for much purpose, for what God has put inside of you. So I hope that you gain that today. Gabby and I we're gonna do kind of an interview style up here, and I hope what you hear in her story is the same thing that you would hear in my story, the encouragement I would have you hear in Matt or Leslie's story or Adrian's or Kim's, and that is that you would hear Jesus in it, that you'd look for Him in it. Because I know that that's the part that all of us share in common, is Christ, is what He's doing in your life. And so I hope that you can be encouraged this morning as we invite Gabby and Niquette to come back up on the stage and join us. Will you help me welcome her? Well, how are you feeling?
This is different than what we just finished doing, so.
You know, you wouldn't know it by
It's
just
a little
looking at
scary.
her, but she's actually intimidated being up here right now. So you have an appreciation for what I do every single week is what I'm hearing.
You have no idea. Yeah.
Well,
So much.
Gabby, you have entitled this Not My Plan, and so we're going to get to that in just a moment. But I wanted to first just talk about worship. Worship was, just a moment ago, amazing. I love our church's worship. It comes from this real sincere place. I'm sure all of you guys agree. It is so much fun to join in your encouragements and everything that just happened. The team was amazing, and I want to just commend you for that. You know, you can go to a church where you tell people, oh, the worship is good, or you can be thankful that we have what we have. So talk about it. So how does that happen? How does a set come together?
Not easily, and with a lot of prayer. It's really just this time with the Lord every single week, well, months in advance, but every single week where it's just putting together what I feel like us as a family need to hear and be reminded of. And so it really is kind of this different journey every single time.
So you don't plan those Sundays like last week where the sermon went right along with the song?
No, that is a God thing. I would like to take credit for that, but that is a God thing. And we don't ever talk about that kind of stuff. And so I'm just amazed every time when He does what He does.
So was this the path for your life? As we're trying to encourage the fellowship, we've been looking at like how do you feel called to ministry? Was this the plan for your life?
Worship is always something that I've loved, and there's just been this thing in my heart that love to be a part of all of that. And it's been in different ways my whole life.
Well, we actually have a video of that right now. We have a little video for you guys to enjoy of Gabby leading worship at a very young age. You've come a long way, but
Yep.
we
had every cassette, VHS, Veggie Tales for days. That was my.
We see where you got your start. Now, did you get
Humble
this?
beginnings.
Did you get this ability to lead worship from any one family member? Was it your mom? Was it Kim?
For sure, Kimmy was the reason why.
No, did this come from somewhere in the family or at all?
We kind of have been on this journey together almost, and it's really special that we get to do it together, and we've grown in it together.
We have a picture of the family, by the way. If you don't know, they're all pretty much involved in worship.
Yes.
But you also have Liv there, who runs our nursery next door. So she actually is over there right now taking care of the kiddos. But what a blessing to be able to be involved with your whole family.
And Seth and Liv lead the static youth team. So it's just really cool to, again, grow and figure this thing out together, because ministry is kind of a beast all its own in a lot of ways.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, tell us about yourself. So what was growing up for you? Like, how did you meet Jesus?
I've always been involved in church. I grew up in the nursery and did that whole thing, and accepted the Lord at 5, and didn't really know totally just the magnitude of what that meant. I think Leslie kind of said the same thing. That sounds like a really cool thing. Let's do that. And I always grew up in church and just loved being a part of what was happening there, and grew up doing VBS and doing all that stuff in kids' church. I think there's a picture of back at Calvary leading in kids' church too. So I've kind of always done that, and I was kind of the hand motion girl. That was my title. Still am. And so that kind of was a sweet time where I just was super plugged in and super involved and just couldn't get enough of being a part of all of that. And then Clark planted a church, and my family said, we're going to go there. And so
Were you happy about that?
Begrudgingly showed up, and I was 11 when the church started, and so they would drop me off at the other church so I could do my worship thing, and then they would come here when the church planted. And so it was kind of an adjustment for me, and I just didn't understand why I'm not good with change. And so that was a really big change for me, where I kind of had to see what God had in store.
This new church causing all these problems.
I know, yeah.
Well, talk to me about that. So, how did you eventually go? I remember a season of time where I was trying to get you to come to the youth group. That was the goal. If I could just get you to come to the youth group. And I know that there was this other church vying for time. There was this volleyball program, which I'm absolutely sure of this is of the devil. It is his sport. Who's my volleyball players out there? Anybody play volleyball? One person.
Me and Kurt.
I want to see you in the prayer area afterwards.
Yeah.
I'm going to pray for you, Kurt.
Cast the demons.
No, but I wanted her to come get involved. I remember early on seeing there was this thing inside of her that for worship and for different things. And I remember trying to get you to come to the youth group. What eventually got you to come? I'm kind of curious.
A lot of pressure.
Going off of what Pastor Matt said,
down.
Pressure them.
No. There just was a tug, and I think you have to make a choice sometimes where you really love two things. And I could just tell that season of my life was coming to an end, and I loved that season, and the volleyball stuff was awesome. But the tug here was greater for sure. So
you end up here. We end up starting a worship team for the youth band, the youth group. There was actually a season of time where all these students wanted to do that, and so you kind of led that charge. We had a team kind of going, and then all of a sudden, and I'll never forget this, there was somebody who was leading, and then that week was their last week.
Yeah, so I was 15, and the guy who was leading the team at the time let me know that night at youth that, hey, I'm done. Like, I feel like God's calling me on to something else, and so this team is yours, and good luck, I'm not coming back next week. And I knew nothing.
And you had gone to school for music at that point and studied, and
No, I knew nothing. I didn't know what different keys were. I literally zero. I was a part of it, and I loved it, and that's all I knew. And so it was another change, another period of transition where I was just figuring out, like, why? This is not what I planned.
Have you ever been there before where you saw something maybe coming down the road and all of a sudden God moved it all the way up to a point where you were super insecure?
Like, all right, we're doing it. We're doing the thing. Here we go.
It's time.
Yeah.
But you did a great job. And I remember you stepped out and you led. I tried to help. I don't know if I was a help or a hurt, but I gave it my best.
It depended on the day. But it's okay.
It's fair. But anyway, I remember this team, it got going, and suddenly you started having some opportunities. Speak to me about the different things you've done in ministry from being here. Like, how did it all begin till now?
Yeah, so in the youth group, after much pressure, and loved that, and those are for sure some of the best years of my whole life. So again, another plug for Static. If your kids are old enough, get them there. No matter how much pressuring it takes, it's worth it, and it really is just some of the best memories I've ever had. But yeah, so involved in the youth group, and then my junior year is when I stepped out of the volleyball world and started interning, and so I would beg my parents to bring me up here after school, and I just did whatever needed to be done. And then after volunteering, then I kind of got this like internship kind of opportunity, and then got hired on part-time right after my senior year of high school. So lots of different things in the youth and children's. That's when you were still over all of that, and so just kind of your right-hand man in the chaos trying to.
And we needed hand motions. We needed lots of hand motions in kids' church.
Yeah.
We actually do have a video of you doing hand motions. So I just want to once again show how the skills have developed. So let's go ahead and take a look.
Your
parents are awesome for these, by the way. We've got so many more. No, I'm just kidding. What I find interesting about your story is the verse where Jesus is saying, he says, if you're faithful with little things. Like that's kind of the idea. And watching your story, it's been a story of being faithful with little things that God has given you, and watching those things grow. From being I remember watching you file worship notes away. You'd come in, and that was all you did, was file worship stuff away. Then you'd come in, you interned with me, and I would give you all of the things I did not want to do, because that's what you do for your interns, right? You're teaching them ministry. And so she came and she'd help me. She did a lot of different things, and then all of a sudden this opportunity arose for you to step into this position, and I felt like you were ready, even though you may or may not have felt that yourself. Speak to me about some of the difficulties. What are the difficulties in things not going according to plan? I know for you, who's my planners? You guys are planners out there?
You're my people.
If without a plan, you are like lost. That's Gab. So how do you speak to me about the difficulties of following God when the plan's not at all what it looked like in your head?
Yeah, I feel like every part of my story, every like new chapter has been way sooner than I anticipated it would come, which is a God thing, because I didn't feel ready, but he definitely surrounded me with people that encouraged me and supported me, even in the doubt. And then there were some people who had issues with it too, where I'm young, and so my age was an issue, and even the fact that I'm a female in a male kind of role a lot of times, there are a lot of people with questions, and so I would say the hardest part of all of that was just keeping my head on straight and relying on the Lord to be my strength, and then also to completely find my identity in him, because there were a lot of people speaking things over me that I know weren't of him. And so I knew that if he called me to this place, he would qualify me to do what I needed to do. And so just the insecurities probably were the hardest part of that whole season.
Well, what are the difficulties of, I mean, if you're in ministry, you're in the ministry of people, and so
Yeah,
how do you...
people are fun sometimes.
How do you walk through some of that gracefully?
With Jesus, you can't do it on your own, and there were a lot of moments where grace had to become more than just a topic and something that I knew in my head, but I really, like, the rubber hit the road, and it was like, all right, now what are you going to do with all of this head knowledge? And extending grace to people can be really hard sometimes, but it really was just a walk with the Lord to completely lean on him for that kind of a thing.
When did grace sort of set in for you, like this gospel of grace, this understanding that we have of the finished work?
Yeah, there was a time in high school, I went to a Presbyterian high school, and so there were some theological differences, and so there was a lot of apologetics going on for me, and so that was a time too where I really grew in that and really had to figure out, okay, what do I believe and where are we going with this? And I had to kind of speak up and, like, be bold about my faith and what I felt like was important, and so that really grew me. And so I think there's just been all these things along the way where you ask why and you don't understand. There's so many questions in the moment, and then you get to this place where you're like, oh, God had a bigger plan. Like, he was preparing me all along, and it's cool to look back in that regard.
What is the most, I mean, all of us when we worship, I imagine we, I don't know, there's certain aspects of God sometimes that I think mean more to others.
Yeah.
When grace changed the way you thought, when you saw God a certain way, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah.
Some of you guys were kind of in our first group of students that kind of went through, and I don't know, I think it's great that y'all don't have to unlearn certain things, but how did the change of perspective impact how you worshiped?
One thing I've learned here is that words matter, and so there's a lot of songs that I really love but would never do here because the lyrics are not theologically sound, and so leading a team under that is important, and I've learned a lot because when grace changes you and you really understand what God did for you, then you don't want to sing about the stuff that's not true. And you don't want to confuse people with religion either. No matter how beautiful the song is, you don't want to confuse people with religion. And so, and I also think that when grace lands in your heart in the way that it's meant to, when you really see Jesus for who he is, worship is your only response. You can't keep it to yourself, and you don't want to sing anything but the truth.
It's awesome. Oftentimes we get asked, somebody will see one of their favorite songs being sung, and all of a sudden there's a word that gets changed. Why do we do that?
I just don't want to sing anything that's not true, or that could come off as something that's not true. And that's something I really learned just in the youth world, because we don't have to unteach students, which is a really, really cool thing. There's nothing that I would want to sing that would then contradict what is said afterwards. And so I really had to learn that in the youth stuff, because there's so many fun, upbeat, Jesus, let's worship. And then you're like, oh, the words are so awful. And so learning that there then definitely translated here to where there's just good news to sing about. You don't want to sing about the stuff that's not. I don't know.
Well, I remember there was a season of time where I didn't understand that, and I was getting grace, and I remember singing songs that I absolutely loved, and then being told, hey, those songs...
I didn't want to have a moment like you had.
I wasn't going to bring it up, but these moments where, in other words, you can't sing this, and it really does come down to, I believe,
if you have a dad, all of us have a dad, right? And if you love your dad and he loves you and you have this great relationship, and then somebody else is trying to tell you about your dad, and it's just not
That's
true.
not right.
Like one thing in particular that I think is interesting is how often we try to get God to show up to something that he's already there at. Like that's got to be really weird for him to hear about. Right?
I'm here.
Like, why does everyone keep telling me to show up? I'm everywhere.
Yeah, but one thing I am encouraged about, like, I don't want to just sit here and dog lyrics because there's a lot of incredible stuff out there. It's been cool to see. I haven't been in this season for a very long time, but it's been really neat to see just in the period that I have been how much people are getting grace. Yeah. And there's so many more songs available to us at this point that where we can sing the truth and not have to switch things around and or completely throw it out almost. Just people are getting it. The world is waking up to the good news, and so it's encouraging.
So to ask the $1 million question, what is worship to you?
It's really just, it's a lifestyle. I think people very quickly associate worship with the music, and that's one of my favorite parts about what worship is, and that's always been my happy place is worship, or when I'm stressed or I don't have the words to sing, to put some music on and to be reminded of the truth. That's my favorite thing. But worship is, it's a lifestyle, and it's just being in awe of what God has done. And like I said, when the gospel changes you, it's just all the time. It's all the time.
If you could explain a couple things. So what do you wish that everybody knew about ministry?
It's really hard. And it takes a lot of patience and prayer and grace because you're dealing with people, and everyone's different, and everyone's preferences are different, and trying to navigate all of that is tricky. But it's just the coolest thing, and no one is... there's a place for everybody. And so the best memories that I've had in my whole life have been doing ministry and being involved. And it's not just the big things, it's the little things that maybe just a couple people know about, and it's God is so good that way. To you're a part of something, and he is just so good back.
Well, what's the opposite side? So what's been one of the most frustrating things that you've had to walk through? You don't have to give like an example of that, but what's like how did you walk through that? Again, knowing that your story is, I like to know the plan, I like to know where God's taking me, and then I'm watching this story where it doesn't seem like at all your plan has worked. And yet God's led you here, and I think that it's absolutely for a reason. And I love your heart in worship and what you share. On the difficult days, though, on those days where all of us go through those moments where either you wonder, God, where are you? Or you're wondering, God, you're leading me, but I can't see to where. Yeah. What encouragement would you give people who are in the same season?
Don't give up, and don't lose sight of what's happening right now. And I've seen so many people in a season of waiting where they feel like God's calling them to something, or they feel like God has something in store for them, and that's all they focus on is what they don't have yet. When God has so much good for you, it's right in your lap if you just look and have the perspective. And my whole journey has just been, I don't get why I'm filing papers, but here I am, so this is what we're going to do, and doing the little things. And I think when you establish a relationship with God and even just a work ethic inside yourself that, God, whatever you have for me, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it like it's the big thing. I'm going to do it so faithfully and with excellence to where if I'm filing papers or I'm leading a room in worship, it's all for you anyways. And what he does in the little things, even just to prepare your heart, like I would not have been ready, and I didn't feel ready, but he had me ready because of all of those little things. So do what's in front of you. Do what's in front of you, and don't just look so far in the future to where you miss what God's doing right now.
Well, and I think that's huge. I know that myself, others, I'm sure, feel that way. You grow up in a world where people are often asking you, "Hey, what's your 5-year?
next?
What's
What's
your
next?
10-year?
Yeah.
Where are you headed? Where are you going?"
It's so easy to go there.
Well, yeah, and it's difficult because, again, as I've been saying, all of us are called to this thing called ministry. Like, we're all ministers of a gospel. We're all we all in our different ways and our different giftings and our different leanings, the things that God has placed within each one of us, provide for us opportunities to do that. And it is very easy, if you're focused on some kind of grand picture or grand design, to miss the things that God has put right in front of you. And if I were to commend you, I absolutely love that, again, you're still doing hand motions for all the VBS stuff. You still do all the different things that I believe God has placed inside of you, all the little gifts and strengths and the ways that you lead, and you lead gracefully. And I know that I speak on behalf of, I think, the church in saying that we are so thankful to have you and so thankful to have your story as a part of our own. Am I alone in that, or do y'all agree? That's really all we have for us, but I do really love this part of her story, and I want to launch from this as we kind of talk more as a group. But one more time, I just want to thank Gabby for coming up. Gabby, thank you so much. She makes it look easy on Sundays, but I tell you what, holding a microphone in your hand is intimidating. This is where I want us to kind of focus our attention for the next few minutes. What I love about all of these stories, which is really fascinating to me, is that God has put together a team for you guys, right? We're here to serve you guys. We're here to serve the church. That's why we're up here. And I love that God, for whatever reason, for this season, has put together a team of people who have very similar stories. None of us really planned on being here. This was definitely a story where God was putting together something to take this message and to spread it. But I love that in the same way that I feel that way, that I feel like, well, God, you brought me here, and you brought Gabby and Leslie and the team and all these people. I look out and see all of you guys, and I think, God, you also brought all of us together. And it's not by a mistake. We're living in a day and age that is vitally important that the message is heard. Look, can I tell you something? The gospel is the most powerful thing on the planet we have in our hands. The powerful good news to share with the world. All of our world's frustrations, right, with all of the different issues. Think about all the different issues, whether it be racism, sexism, whether it be whatever the thing may be. The gospel is the solution. It is the only thing that will solve all of these problems for us, because it's the great equalizer, right? It puts all of us in this place where we need Jesus, and he loves us so much. And I love this, is that we as a group, we as a team get to do this thing together. And maybe you're here today and you're saying to yourself, yeah, but I don't know if I'm really called to grab a microphone and get up on the stage and speak, or to lead people in teaching or in worship and all of those things. I have wonderful news. You don't have to do any of those things. You know, Paul the apostle was talking to Timothy, and he says, Timothy, look, you don't got to be an evangelist, okay? Paul was an evangelist, and if you're an evangelist in this place, let me tell you something. I love you, but you're also probably hard to sit next to at lunch. Like, that's an evangelist, okay? And Paul was that way. I think he probably drove a lot of people nuts. And there was Timothy that came along, and Timothy was more of a pastoring type. He just cared for people. And Paul looked at Timothy, and he says, Timothy, listen, you don't got to come do what I got to do. You don't have to come be an evangelist. He said, but you can do the work of an evangelist. You can step out and do the ministry, Timothy, even you. And so I want to encourage all of us, whether you get involved with a community group, whether you get involved in the kids program, or shaking hands at the front door, no matter what it is, there's no bigger or smaller job. There's no bigger or smaller ministry or calling. These things, you just don't see these things in Scripture. What we see is a family. What we see is a body of Christ working together to share the message of grace with the entire world. And I can say on behalf of the staff and everyone you've heard, we need all of you. We need everybody. We want to do life with you. In fact, that's why we're doing today. We're building this community here of grace-minded people Because can I tell you something? The world needs a place like Grace Church that they can walk in those doors and feel loved, feel the love of God, feel the grace of God, being able to lay down all of the images, all of the shame, all of the things that many of us carry all week long and come to a place where there can be a fellowship of people who look after each other after the Spirit. Amen. That's what I want to be a part of, and that's what you want to be a part of. That's why we're here. And I want to invite you to come to be a part even more so of the ministry. And I want you to also invite your friends and your neighbors and everyone you know. Come be a part of what God is doing at this little spot here in Longwood. It's pretty awesome, and I feel very proud to be a part of it. This morning, I'd like you to take a moment. We've ended a little early today on purpose. I'd like you to take a moment. The band's going to play. And I want you to sit with God for just a moment. Don't assume you know what He wants to say to you this morning. Maybe He'll put on your heart to come be a part of one of the different ministries that you've heard over the past few weeks. Maybe He'll put something totally different on your heart, something He's leading you in specifically. But whatever it is, I want it to come from Him and not from me, okay? So I want you to take a moment. Don't talk to your neighbor for a second. Just focus in on the Lord and let Him speak to you. I'll give you a minute. Lord, we love you so much. You're so amazing. God, I look out over a group of people that you've put gifts and talents, strengths, all inside of them. And Lord, I'm so thankful that you've brought all of these here to this fellowship, to this gathering. Lord, as we look forward to all of the different dreams and visions and things in all of our hearts that you've placed there, God, the things that we feel that you've led us to. God, I pray that we would step out in confidence. God, that we would step out leaning on your strength. God, that nobody would sign up to be a part of anything that they don't feel you leading them in. God, that we would follow you, we'd lean on you and believe in what you're doing in our lives. God, that doesn't always look the way we think. It doesn't always look like the end product, but God, you're building something so incredible in this thing called the church. Lord, this demonstration of grace to the world, this church, this picture of the beautiful love that you share with each and every one of us. God, I pray that you'd put in our hearts the place to be involved. In Jesus' name.